This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and I know, right? This looks silly, doesn't it? This is the Samsung Galaxy S4 Zoom. It's a camera. Obviously, it looks like a camera. It's also an Android smartphone, and we're going to look at it now. So this is the Samsung Galaxy S4 Zoom. Now this came out a while ago, but in the United States, no carrier picked it up, and it is an unusual proposition. I can see why they might have hesitated, but AT&T has picked this up, and they're offering it for $149 on contract and around $500 to $550 off contract. So this is both a phone and a camera. So if you want to know why it exists, it's exactly for that reason. There was the Galaxy camera, which was a Wi-Fi only model, or you could get it on Verizon and LTE, and it had only a data connection. So you had to have a separate data plan in addition to the one that you already have for your smartphone. So this way, for people who really want that kind of camera experience first, but they don't want a second data plan, this one has the phone built in. It's an odd phone though, isn't it? Look at this. This looks like a point-and-shoot camera. In fact, this is bulkier than a lot of point-and-shoot cameras. And just to show you what I mean, here's our Panasonic Lumix camera. This is not even a particularly super-duper small or expensive one. This is about a $250 camera that's about, 2 years old now. And you can see the difference in size. So the Galaxy S4 Zoom is pretty darn big even as point-and-shoots go, which have gotten extremely pocketable now. And to compare it in size to our Samsung Galaxy S4, it has a smaller footprint, certainly because 4.3-inch display versus a 5-inch display here, but obvious difference in the thickness. And the form factor in general, one is a phone, usual slate phone. This is a point-and-shoot camera that happens to make phone calls. So obviously this is for you people who do want a camera first and probably are going to use a Bluetooth headset because this is a little bit bulky and just weird looking. You know, it's funny, you can hold a phablet to your head, giant smartphone, and people won't even stare anymore. They're used to that. But if you hold something that really frankly looks this much like a camera, people will stare at you. As cameras go, it's a pretty nice point and shoot. You can see right here we've got a Samsung lens here. The equivalent is 24 to 240 millimeters, so that's 10x optical zoom. That's less than the 21x optical zoom on the Samsung Galaxy camera, which is a data device only. 24 millimeter equivalent for your wide angle, and that's pretty wide. That's pretty nice. Obviously we have a nice lens cover here, protects it, and this is a zoomable lens, and we'll show you that in a minute. So it's going to pop out when you actually zoom. Got a xenon flash on here, which is always good. We have a focusing light as well, which helps for low light. The battery is removable. The back doesn't pop off, obviously, like it would on a smartphone. We have this little door right here, a little yank point on it, and kind of got like camera style, where they always have the little side-loaded batteries in here. Your SIM card slots in there, and then there's a battery, 2330 milliamp battery, so not a huge battery by smartphone standards. Micro USB port at the bottom, obviously, for charging and for transferring your lovely photos and videos to your computer. On the top here we have a dedicated shutter button. Feels and looks just like a regular camera shutter button. That's nice. If the phone is on, that is the screen is on, and you press this, it will launch the camera. If the phone is off, it will not. Our volume controls are over here. Our power button, all on the same side. 3.5 millimeter audio jack up top. We've got our microphones built in. And on the bottom we've got a little piece of plastic covering the hole right now, but there's actually a tripod mount, which is pretty nice. And you can see also our micro SD card slot, and that's SDXC, so it's compatible with higher capacity cards, which is a good thing again, because you got a fairly high megapixel, 16 megapixel here, camera that, well, lends itself to taking a lot of pictures. If you look at the front, it looks just like any other Galaxy phone. We have capacitive buttons that are hard to see as ever with Samsung for your back and your menu, a regular movable clicky home button right there, and our 4.3-inch Super AMOLED display. The resolution is only 540 by 960. You remember that? That's pretty old by today's standards. It's still a pretty colorful and sharp display. Since it's Super AMOLED, you get great blacks, you get vivid colors. The bad thing about Super AMOLED is it's not so viewable outdoors. So for something that you are going to use as a camera replacement where outdoor viewability is really paramount, it's kind of too bad in this case it has a Super AMOLED display. All the rest of the specs on this are kind of middling too. In fact, the name is actually misleading. It's a Galaxy S4 Zoom, but it's not a Galaxy S4 with a camera grafted to the back. Specs-wise, you're looking at something that's more like a Galaxy S3. Continuing on with the specs, we have a Exynos CPU, that's Samsung's CPU. It's a 1.5 gigahertz dual core 4212. So again, you're looking at Galaxy S3 range performance. It has Mali 400 graphics, 1.5 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of internal storage. Around 11 to 12 are available for your use, but you can augment that storage with that micro SD card. Now, various reviews have claimed all sorts of different weights for this guy, so we put it on the scale and measured 7.6 ounces on our scale. AT&T's website says it weighs 9.9 ounces. At any rate, this is heavy as a phone and as a point-and-shoot camera. I mean, it feels really heavy. You'll notice it. Not that you're going to die holding it when you're web browsing and stuff, but if you're going to hold this to your head for a long period of time when you're having a phone call, it's going to feel mighty heavy. If you put it in your pocket, your pants will drag down unless you have a pretty tight waistband. The phone has a GPS with GLONASS inside, and it has dual-band Wi-Fi as well as Bluetooth 4.0 and the usual NFC on board. So as a smartphone, it's middling in terms of specs. Really, the uniqueness, again, is this camera on the back. Now, here's the interesting thing. The Nokia Lumia 1020, all you camera buffs know about that. 41 megapixel. Instead of having an optical zoom with a moving lens on it, it uses a digital crop. Since there's so many megapixels, you can do a whole lot of cropping on that without actually having any loss in your image quality. So this is going at it the old-fashioned way with the zoom lens. That's what makes it so bulky. And you can see what it looks like. I've just pressed the camera button to launch the camera application, and there we have it. So, not petite. Obviously, when you're making a phone call, the camera is not running, so you won't have that sticking out. And you can see the element move as I actually zoom using the zoom ring on it. There are on-screen zoom controls on the camera as well. Now, image quality and video quality on this is about what you would expect from a 16 megapixel point-and-shoot camera, which is to say pretty good, better than most phones on the market, but not all. I would still say the Lumia can beat some point-and-shoots on the market pretty well. And even Samsung Galaxy S4, the 13 megapixel camera, takes some pretty good images that challenge point-and-shoots. So that's the thing here. You're looking at something that would be extremely expensive for a 16 megapixel point-and-shoot. It's the camera integration, and rather it's the phone integration that you're paying for here. So here we are focusing on our Panasonic camera point and shoot right here, and I can use the zoom on the zoom ring on the back right now. I'm reaching behind, or we have our on-screen controls for that. Now the controls here are very interesting. Obviously there's no physical hardware controls, and point and shoots don't usually have a whole lot of those anyway. So you've got a kind of hybrid interface that's not going to be real familiar to photography buffs necessarily, but it gets the job done. So we tap on the modes, and we have auto where it decides everything for you. It does a pretty good job. We have smart. It takes a couple of different scene modes that it thinks are the best. We have my mode, which is just you pick from some of their presets here, like beauty face, landscape, macro. They also have food shot, animated photo, night, that kind of thing. And lastly, we have expert mode. Now here's where you think you're going to get those control dials just like you have on a regular camera. Not quite so much. It does give you little explanations here, so it's handy for those of you who are just learning. But right now you can see that we're in manual shutter priority mode. So I can switch and choose, and it's going to set the aperture manually. There is no aperture priority setting here, but you can actually get to that, which is interesting. Here we have basic EV adjustment. Now, I don't know why they have to have a big old menu just for something like that, but you can also get to other stuff like your color balance adjustments here, saturation levels, all the things you would expect from a camera phone basically, your contrast settings, all that sort of thing. And back over here on the P setting we have our ISO adjustment, auto white balance. You can actually get to aperture priority in these. Not everything is where I would expect it. Your drive mode is here as well, so you can do things like take 4 shots per second if you want. So it's a little bit odd, a little bit different, but once you learn it, it's just fine. And it has all those neat Samsung scene modes that are pretty popular on Galaxy smartphones as well. And then we have other settings here. So you don't actually have to go to that wheel if you don't want to override some things. You've got flash control, your white balance, sharing options with Samsung stuff like Buddy Photo Share, Chat On. Probably a lot of you are going to use this to upload stuff to YouTube no matter where you are. As long as you have an LTE or 3G or a Wi-Fi connection, you can do that, which is pretty cool. And then you can control whether or not you have a beep when you take pictures and so on. geolocation, daytime imprint, all that sort of stuff. Generally speaking, you got tap to focus here. It's pretty quick to take a shot. Every once in a while it acts sort of like a smartphone then, and it hunts a little bit and gets confused. But overall, it does a fairly good job. So let's take a look at some pictures that we've taken. So here's a macro shot that we took that's actually quite nice and a lot of detail there. And you can see the striations and the color on the petal there. Very good. A lot of detail. I didn't get a whole lot of bokeh automatically on this shot. Probably, if you're really into bokeh and macro shots, you're going to have to set your aperture priority yourself. Here again, this was kind of a macro shot. You can see it didn't do much bokeh in the background automatically, but very fine detail here. Just general landscape kind of shot. The colors are hyper vivid here. Part of that's the Super AMOLED display you're looking at. If you look at it on the computer, the colors are less Disney-esque. They're pretty good. And we have a lot of detail there without it looking too over sharp. And so it's really a pretty nice camera. Now for a challenge, we have a high contrast indoor shot, light streaming in on the white chest of our cat right here in a fairly dark room. And you can see the usual, well, screw-ups that it made. That the chest is a little overexposed. There's some detail still in the fur here, but there is a reasonable amount of detail. Again, this is like a decent point-and-shoot camera. And the fur on the back, that's pretty good, but it gets lost in the blacks eventually. And here we have another indoor shot, not really well lit, and there's actually a good amount of detail. The browns in the box are there, and there's a whole lot of detail on the cat's face. We were testing how quickly he could shoot photos, so the cat was really a great example for that, as he was having a nutty fit inside of a box. And in fact, you can see we caught a lot of shots that are in focus, which is a good sign. And here's another low light shot, my geeky desk with my Android toy. And the thing is, with the low light here and the brightness of the monitor in the upper corner, it still did a very good job of capturing and saturating the colors. Usually in darkness you'll see those things disappear, and the noise levels are actually very well controlled. I know some people have said they thought the noise levels were kind of high on this. I find them quite good. Again, by point and shoot standards, this is not a digital SLR. And one last of our cat's butt. And you can see the highlights are a little overexposed here where the sun is hitting the floor. So this is not a perfect camera, but again, you're talking about point-and-shoot quality. You can also shoot 1080p video at 30 frames per second, and it has optical image stabilization, which is nice, so you don't have video that's going bump, 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 bump. Now back to this as a smartphone. This is running Android 4.2 Jelly Bean with Samsung TouchWiz software as ever with their UI overlay on here. And it doesn't have all of the Samsung features. It doesn't have the split window that we've seen on some others, for example. Plenty of bloatware in here from AT&T. You can hide these. You can uninstall them. So just about every piece of bloat that AT&T has ever made is on here. And we have Polaris Office, which is actually a good thing. And we have Samsung's S-Voice. I prefer Google for voice commands myself. Samsung Apps, Samsung Hub. They bundle Paper Artist on here, Story Album, those kinds of things. Call quality is quite good. Again, you might look silly holding this to your ear, but it actually gets the job done just fine. LTE on here for fast 4G data speeds, 3G fallback. So that's the difference. You can buy this actually unlocked for less money, full retail if you want to buy this retail, but you won't have LTE, which is kind of nice to have if you're going to be uploading generally 5 meg images if you're shooting at full resolution, or 1080p video obviously is going to take up even more in terms of bandwidth. In terms of performance from our 1.5 gigahertz dual-core Exynos CPU, don't expect the greatest here. Quadrant, 4,912 on Tutu, 15,396. 3D Mark Ice Storm, the Extreme Test, 2,377. Graphics Bench 2.7 for the Egypt 2.5 off-screen test, 15 frames per second. SunSpider 965, which is pretty good actually for this. So those numbers are about 1/2 to small, depending on the test in question, to 1/4 of the fastest phones on the market right now. But that said, it's a perfectly usable smartphone. If you want to play the latest cutting-edge 3D games on this isn't the greatest choice. If photography is your thing, obviously it's well optimized to handle that. We had no problems with the performance of the camera in terms of what's needed from the CPU, so it does a fine job. The camera itself has a backside illuminated sensor as well, in addition to that xenon flash. Battery life, that's a hard one to nail here because it really depends on how you use this phone or camera. Aha, there you go. If you use this as a phone and you don't take any pictures, it doesn't have a very demanding CPU. It has a small, not high resolution display, so absolutely no problem making it through the day with moderate to even heavy use. That's a perfectly ample battery capacity for that CPU and screen combination. If you shoot a lot of pictures and a lot of video, a lot shorter battery life there. Then you're going to have to use it more like a point and shoot and buy a spare battery and carry it around with you. If you want to go and take 40 photos and shoot some videos in the day, you're not going to make it through the day on a charge with this. So that's the Samsung Galaxy S4 Zoom. It's available now on AT&T. Like I said, $149 on contract, $500 off contract or so. And it's a bizarre little creature, isn't it? It's a Samsung Galaxy S3 with a point-and-shoot camera grafted on. But the nice thing is, if you really like the Samsung Galaxy camera but you didn't want to have a separate contract, well, now you have a phone and you have the camera together. That's the idea. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Visit our website for the full review, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.